My brother Marcus has been missing for 11 years, and I'm the only person alive who knows what really happened to him on Christmas Eve, 2013. The official report says he wandered off during a routine patrol in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. Hypothermia, disorientation. A tragic accident during the worst blizzard to hit the region in 40 years. That's a lie. I know it's a lie because 3 days before he vanished, Marcus called me at 2 a.m., his voice shaking so badly I barely recognized it. He told me he'd found something in the snow, something impossible, something that had been watching the ranger station for weeks. And then he told me something that still wakes me up at night. It knows my name, Danny. It said my name. I should have driven up there immediately. Should have dragged him out of those mountains whether he wanted to leave or not. But I didn't. I told him to get some sleep, told him the isolation was getting to him. 4 days later, search and rescue found his truck abandoned at the Elk Ridge trailhead. Engine still running, driver's side door hanging open. His service weapon was still holstered in the center console, but Marcus was gone. They searched for 16 days. Helicopters, dog teams, thermal imaging. 200 volunteers combing every inch of those mountains. They found nothing, not a single footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not one trace of a 6'2" park ranger who knew those woods better than anyone alive. What they did find, and what was never included in any official report, was a series of tracks in the snow approximately 300 yards from the abandoned truck. Tracks that measured 19 inches long and 8 inches wide. Tracks with a stride length that would require something standing over 8 feet tall. I know this because I have the photographs. Marcus sent them to me the night before he disappeared. And now, after 11 years of silence, after being told by federal agents to forget what I knew, after watching my family fall apart under the weight of unanswered questions, I'm going to tell you everything. This is the true story of what happened to Ranger Marcus Webb. And I'm telling it now because last week I received a letter. No return address, no signature. Just 5 words written in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. I'm still here. Find me. Marcus wasn't supposed to be working Christmas Eve. He'd requested the time off months in advance, planning to drive down to Missoula and spend the holiday with our mother. But 3 days before Christmas, his supervisor called with an emergency. Ranger Pete Dostovich had slipped on ice and shattered his ankle. Someone needed to cover the Elk Ridge station through New Year's. Marcus volunteered without hesitation. That was who he was, the guy who always showed up, who never complained, who genuinely believed that protecting those mountains was something close to sacred. He'd been a ranger for 9 years by then, knew every trail, every creek, every hidden meadow in the Bitterroot Wilderness. He'd tracked grizzlies, rescued lost hikers, and once spent 3 days in a snow cave, waiting out a storm that killed 4 experienced climbers on an adjacent peak. Marcus didn't scare easily, which is why his voice on that phone call terrified me. "I need you to listen," he said, "and I need you not to think I've lost my mind." It was December 21st, 2013. I was in Seattle, finishing up last-minute Christmas shopping. My phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I almost didn't answer. God, I wish I hadn't answered, because then I could have lived the rest of my life not knowing, not carrying this weight. "There's something up here, Danny, in the trees above the station. I've been seeing it for 5 days now." "Seeing what?" "I don't know what to call it. It looks like a man, but wrong. Too tall, too wide, covered in something dark. Hair, maybe." "I can't tell from this distance," I remember laughing, actually laughing. "Marcus, you're describing Bigfoot. You know that, right?" The silence on his end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "I know what I'm seeing," he finally said, "and it's not some guy in a costume. It's not a bear. It's not my imagination. It stands there, Danny, for hours, just watching. And last night," he paused. I heard him take a shaky breath. "Last night it came closer." "How close?" "Close enough that I could see its face." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Marcus had stared down charging grizzlies without flinching. He'd pulled drowning children from frozen rivers. Nothing rattled him. But right now, my brother sounded like a frightened child. "What did it look like?" "Human," he whispered. "Too human. That's what scared me most. The proportions are all wrong. The arms too long, the shoulders too broad, the head sitting forward on its neck like an ape. But the face, Danny, the face looked almost like a person, like something that used to be a person, or something trying to become one. I didn't know what to say. Marcus wasn't prone to flights of fancy. He was the most grounded, practical person I'd ever known. If he was telling me he saw something impossible, then he saw something impossible. Have you reported this? Who would I report it to? My supervisor would think I'd lost it. The Forest Service would pull me from duty, send me for a psych eval. And the thing is, he trailed off again. The thing is what? I don't want it to leave. I know that sounds insane. But Danny, I've been dreaming about this my whole life. Every ranger who works these mountains has heard the stories. Tracks in the snow, strange vocalizations at night, hikers who swear they saw something watching them from the tree line. We all laugh about it. We all pretend it's nonsense, but deep down, every single one of us wonders. Wonders what? If they're real. And now I know. They are. At least one of them is. And it's chosen me for some reason. It's trying to communicate. That's when he told me the part that still haunts me. It knows my name. Tonight, when it came to the edge of the clearing, it made sounds. Low, guttural sounds that I couldn't understand at first. But then it changed. The sounds became clearer. And I swear to God, Danny, I swear on everything I love, it said, Marcus. Not perfectly, not like a human would say it, but close enough that there was no mistaking it. I wanted to tell him to get out, to pack his truck and drive away from those mountains and never look back. But I didn't, because even through his fear, I could hear something else in my brother's voice. Wonder. Awe. The excitement of someone standing at the edge of the unknown, about to step over. What are you going to do? I asked. Tomorrow night is Christmas Eve. I'm going to try to make contact. Real contact. I've been leaving food at the tree line. Fish, berries, whatever I can find. It's been taking them. I think it's starting to trust me. Marcus, that's dangerous. You don't know what this thing wants. It wants connection. I can feel it. It's been alone out there for so long, Danny, watching humans from a distance, never able to approach. Can you imagine what that's like? Decades, maybe centuries of isolation, and now, finally, it's found someone willing to meet it halfway. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. And Danny, when this is over, when I've documented everything, the world is going to change. Everything we think we know about human evolution, about what's possible, about what's hiding in the wild places of this planet, all of it will have to be rewritten. Those were the last words my brother ever spoke to me. December 24th, 2013, Christmas Eve. Marcus's shift log, which I obtained years later through a source I can never name, shows that he completed his standard morning patrol at 0847 hours. He noted moderate snowfall, temperatures around 12 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility of approximately 1 mile. His noon check-in was routine. He reported all quiet, no visitors, no incidents. At 16:23 hours, he logged something unusual. Large animal tracks observed approx. 300 yards NE of station. Photographs taken. Tracks measure 19 inches in length. Non-standard configuration. Will investigate further. That was his last official entry. But I have something else, something that wasn't in any report. At 4:47 p.m., Marcus sent me a text message. It contained a single photograph and 3 words. The photograph showed a massive footprint in fresh snow. The scale was difficult to judge without reference, but based on the surrounding terrain, the print had to be at least 1.5 feet long. The toes were clearly visible, 5 of them arranged in an almost human pattern, but much broader, much deeper. The 3 words beneath the photo were, "It's finally time." I tried calling him. No answer. I texted back, "Time for what?" "Marcus, call me." Nothing. At 5:15 p.m., I called the Bitterroot Ranger Station directly. The phone rang and rang. Nobody picked up. At 5:30 p.m., I called the Forest Service emergency line and reported that I was concerned about my brother's safety. They assured me someone would check on him within the hour. At 6:42 p.m., Ranger Supervisor Thomas Hendricks arrived at the Elk Ridge station to find it empty. Marcus's truck was parked in its usual spot. His dinner, a can of beef stew, sat half-eaten on the table. The wood stove was still burning. His jacket hung on its hook by the door, but his boots were missing, and the back door of the station was standing open, snow blowing in across the floor. Hendricks followed the boot prints into the woods. This is where the official story and the real story diverge. The official story says Hendricks followed the tracks for approximately 100 yards before losing them in heavy snowfall. He returned to the station, called for backup, and a search was initiated the following morning. The real story, which Hendricks told me himself years later after 3 glasses of whiskey and a promise that I would never reveal his name, is very different. Hendricks followed those boot prints for almost a quarter mile. The snow was falling hard, but Marcus's tracks were fresh, deep, easy to follow. They led northeast toward a steep ravine that marked the boundary of the official wilderness area. And they weren't alone. Running parallel to Marcus's boot prints, approximately 10 feet to the left, was a second set of tracks, prints that measured nearly 2 feet long. Prints that sank 6 inches into packed snow, far deeper than any human could create. "I've never seen anything like it," Hendricks told me. "Whatever made those tracks had to weigh at least 500 pounds. Maybe more." The stride was enormous, 4 or 5 feet between prints. It was moving fast. Which direction? Same as Marcus, they were traveling together. Together? Hendricks looked at me with haunted eyes. That's what I said, together. The tracks were parallel, maintaining consistent distance. Your brother wasn't running from something, Danny. He was walking alongside it. Hendricks followed those twin sets of tracks to the edge of the ravine, and there, in a small clearing sheltered by ancient pines, he found something that made him stop cold. The tracks converged. Marcus's boot prints and those massive inhuman tracks merged into a single churned patch of snow, approximately 10 feet in diameter. The snow within this circle had been compressed, packed down as if by tremendous weight. There were scuff marks, disturbances that might have been a struggle, or might have been something else entirely. Beyond the circle, only one set of tracks continued, the large ones, leading down into the ravine toward terrain so steep and treacherous that Hendricks knew he couldn't follow. Not in the dark, not in the storm, not alone. He returned to the station and called for help, but he didn't tell anyone what he'd really seen. Not then, not in any official report. Why not? I demanded years later. Because I wanted to keep my job, my pension, my sanity. You tell people you saw Bigfoot tracks. They don't promote you. They send you to a psychiatrist. They question every report you've ever filed. I had 17 years invested, Danny. I wasn't going to throw that away over something nobody would believe. But my brother? Your brother made his choice. Hendricks's voice was bitter. Whatever he went out there to meet, he went willingly. Those tracks told the story clear as day. He wasn't dragged. He wasn't chased. He walked into those woods alongside something that shouldn't exist, and he didn't come back. The official search lasted 16 days. They covered over 100 square miles. They found nothing. But I kept searching. In the months after Marcus disappeared, I took a leave of absence from my job and moved to Missoula. I spent every weekend in those mountains, hiking the same trails Marcus had patrolled, talking to every local who would speak to me. Most of them thought I was grief-stricken, delusional, or both. A few were more sympathetic, and 3 of them told me stories that made my blood run cold. The first was an elderly woman named Ruth Blackwood, who had lived in a cabin near the wilderness boundary for over 40 years. She told me that the Salish people, who had inhabited these mountains for thousands of years, had a name for the creatures that lived in the high places. They called them the Stick Indians, she said, not because they were made of sticks, but because they could move through the forest without making a sound, like shadows between the trees. The elders said they were here long before humans, that they're the ones who truly own these mountains, and that sometimes, when they find a human they consider worthy, they take them. Take them where? Into their world, wherever that is. The old stories say the Stick Indians can walk between places, that the deep forests contain doorways invisible to human eyes, and that those who pass through never return. I thanked her for her time, unsure what to make of such mythology. The second person was a retired logger named Carl Hendricks, who had worked the Bitterroot timber operations in the 1970s. He told me about a morning in the winter of 1974 when his entire crew refused to enter a particular section of forest. Something had been there the night before. The tracks were everywhere, around our equipment, around the portable cabins where we slept. Big tracks, bigger than any man's. And the smell, like wet dog mixed with something rotten. We packed up and moved to a different site. Never went back. Did you ever see anything? Carl looked away. Once, that same winter, driving home after a shift, something crossed the road in front of my truck. It was dusk, bad light, but I saw it clear enough. 8 feet tall, easy, covered in dark hair. It turned and looked at me before it disappeared into the trees. What did its face look like? That's the thing that still gets me after all these years. It looked sad. God help me, it looked sad, like it was carrying a weight I couldn't imagine. The third person was the one who changed everything. Her name was Dr. Miriam Yazzie, and she was a professor of anthropology at the University of Montana. She had spent decades researching indigenous oral histories of the Pacific Northwest, with a particular focus on accounts of anomalous primates. When I told her about Marcus, she didn't dismiss me. She didn't look at me with pity or skepticism. Instead, she pulled out a file folder containing photographs, maps, and documents that made my hands tremble. "Your brother isn't the first," she said quietly, "and he won't be the last." The file contained reports of 16 disappearances in the Bitterroot region over the past 70 years. All of them occurred in winter. All of them involved experienced outdoorsmen who knew the mountains intimately. And in every single case, the missing person was last seen alone in an isolated location during a period of heavy snowfall. None of them were ever found. "The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence," Dr. Yazzie explained, and in 7 of these cases, there were witnesses who reported seeing unusual tracks near the disappearance site. Tracks that were always dismissed or explained away. "What do you think is happening to them?" She hesitated. "I have a theory, but it's not something I can publish, not something the academic community would accept." "Tell me anyway." "I believe these creatures, whatever they are, exist on the margins of human perception. They're intelligent, perhaps more intelligent than us in certain ways. They've survived for millennia by avoiding contact, by staying hidden, by watching from the shadows. But occasionally, very occasionally, they encounter a human who resonates with them, someone who possesses a quality they recognize, and when that happens, they reach out." "Reach out how?" "Communication, first from a distance, then closer. They test the human's reactions, gauge their fear, assess whether they're a threat. And if the human proves trustworthy, if they demonstrate that they're capable of accepting the impossible, then an invitation is extended." "An invitation to what?" Dr. Yazzie met my eyes. "To join them. To leave the human world behind and enter theirs." "That's insane." "Is it? Your brother documented his experiences. He told you the creature was communicating, learning his name, approaching with increasing boldness. Does that sound like a predator stalking prey? Or does it sound like a courtship?" The word landed like a punch. "You're saying Marcus was recruited?" "I'm saying that whatever lives in those mountains isn't what we think it is. It's not an animal. It's not a missing link. It's something older. Something that evolved alongside humanity but chose a different path. And sometimes, for reasons we don't understand, it chooses one of us to walk that path with it. I spent 3 more years searching. 3 years of hiking through blizzards, camping in remote wilderness, following every lead and rumor. I found tracks on 4 separate occasions, massive prints that appeared overnight and vanished with the next snowfall. Once, I found a crude shelter built from branches and bark, large enough to house something twice my size. But I never saw them, and I never found Marcus. In the spring of 2017, I received a visit from 2 men in dark suits who refused to show identification. They claimed to represent a federal task force investigating unusual wildlife activity in wilderness areas. They asked about my brother. They asked about my research. They asked about Dr. Yazzie, who had stopped returning my calls months earlier. And then they gave me a warning. "Mr. Webb, your activities in the Bitterroot region have attracted attention. The kind of attention that isn't healthy for anyone involved. We strongly recommend that you discontinue your investigation and resume normal life. Are you threatening me? We're informing you that certain aspects of the natural world are not meant to be understood by the general public. The ecosystems you're disturbing are fragile and protected. Any continued interference will be met with appropriate legal consequences. What do you know about my brother? The taller of the two men smiled without warmth. Ranger Marcus Webb died of exposure during a winter storm. His body was never recovered due to the extreme terrain. That is the official finding, and that is the truth. Anything else is fantasy, the kind of fantasy that has destroyed families before yours. They left me with a business card containing only a phone number and the instruction to call if I remembered anything useful. I never called, but I stopped searching. Not because I was afraid of them, but because I had run out of leads. Every door I knocked on closed in my face. Dr. Yazzie had left the university, her office cleared out, her research disappeared. Hendrik stopped answering my calls. Ruth Blackwood's cabin stood empty, a for sale sign rotting in the yard. Whatever I had stumbled onto, someone very powerful wanted it buried. So I buried it. Moved back to Seattle. Tried to rebuild my life. Tried to accept that I would never know what happened to my brother. For 11 years, I lived with that acceptance. And then, last week, the letter arrived. The envelope was postmarked from a small town in Montana I'd never heard of, a place called Wisdom, population fewer than 100. There was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, weathered and stained. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible, but unmistakably Marcus's. I had seen his handwriting thousands of times. I knew every loop, every slant, every idiosyncrasy. I'm still here. Find me. Beneath the words was a crude drawing, a map maybe, a triangle with a circle inside it, 3 dots arranged around the perimeter, and at the bottom, a date. December 24th, 2024. This Christmas Eve, exactly 11 years after he disappeared. My hands shook so violently I dropped the paper. I stood in my kitchen, hyperventilating, trying to process what I was seeing. Marcus was alive. He had been alive this whole time, somewhere in those mountains for over a decade, or someone was playing a very cruel joke. I spent 3 days analyzing the letter. I compared the handwriting to old birthday cards, to notes Marcus had left on my refrigerator when he visited. Every comparison confirmed what I already knew. This was written by my brother, but the handwriting had changed. It was shakier, less controlled, as if written by someone who hadn't held a pen in years, or by someone whose physiology had shifted in ways that made fine motor control difficult. I contacted a handwriting expert who owed me a favor. She confirmed the match, but noted something disturbing. Whoever wrote this was under extreme physical stress. The pen pressure is inconsistent, very light in some places, very heavy in others. And there are hesitation marks throughout, as if the writer was stopping to remember how to form certain letters. It's the kind of pattern you see in stroke victims, or people with advanced neurological conditions, or people who haven't written anything in 11 years. That too, though in my experience, those skills don't degrade this much from disuse alone. Something else is going on here. I'm writing this on December 20th, 2024, 4 days before the date on Marcus's map. I've already booked my flight to Missoula. I've packed supplies for a winter expedition into the Bitterroot Wilderness, the same expedition Marcus undertook 11 years ago. I've told no one where I'm going. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe I'm walking into the same trap that swallowed my brother. Maybe those men in dark suits will intercept me before I ever reach the mountains. Maybe the letter is a fake, a lure designed by someone or something that wants to add me to the list of the vanished. I don't care. For 11 years, I've lived with the weight of not knowing, the guilt of not driving up there when Marcus called, the endless wondering about what really happened in those woods on Christmas Eve. If there's even a chance he's alive, even a chance I can bring him home, I have to take it. But I'm not going in blind. Dr. Yazzie may have disappeared, but before she did, she gave me something. A folder of documents she called her insurance policy, with instructions not to open it unless I was certain I would continue the search. I opened it last night. What I found changes everything I thought I knew about these creatures. about their relationship with humanity, and about why certain people are chosen to disappear. The folder contained 17 pages of single-spaced text, along with photographs and official documents that should never have been accessible to a university professor. The first document was a memorandum from the U.S. Forest Service dated 1967, marked "Classified, Eyes Only." It described anomalous bipedal wildlife observed in wilderness areas across the Pacific Northwest and established protocols for managing public awareness of such sightings. The second document was a research proposal submitted to DARPA in 1978, requesting funding for a project called Looking Glass. The proposal described attempts to establish communication with indigenous non-human primates exhibiting signs of advanced cognition. The proposal was approved with a budget that had been redacted with black marker. The third document was an incident report from 1983, describing the recovery of a specimen from the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. The specimen was described as a male subject approximately 8 feet in height, covered in coarse brown hair with cranial capacity exceeding that of Homo sapiens. The specimen was alive when recovered. The document noted that the specimen died in transit to an undisclosed facility and the tissue samples were preserved for analysis. The attached photographs showed exactly what you would expect, exactly what I had spent 11 years hoping to find: proof. But the most disturbing document was the last one. It was a summary report from 2001, describing the conclusions of 3 decades of research into these creatures. I'll quote it directly because these words have been burned into my memory. Analysis confirms that the subjects represent a distinct evolutionary lineage, diverging from the common ancestor of Homo sapiens approximately 1.2 million years ago. Unlike humans, the subjects appear to have developed along a path that prioritized physical adaptation, sensory enhancement, and environmental integration over tool use and technological development. Most significantly, the subjects demonstrate cognitive capabilities that differ qualitatively from human intelligence. They exhibit no capacity for abstract symbolic language, but display extraordinary aptitude for what can only be described as empathic communication, the direct transmission of emotional and intentional states between individuals. This capability extends, in some cases, to interspecies communication. Subjects have been observed establishing rapport with human researchers, accurately perceiving their emotional states, and responding appropriately to unspoken needs. 3 researchers have reported experiencing direct mental contact with subjects, describing the sensation as overwhelming and transformative. One researcher, Dr. Redacted, ceased all contact with colleagues following extended exposure to Subject 7. His current whereabouts are unknown. 2 others requested immediate reassignment and have refused to discuss their experiences. Conclusion: the subjects represent a potential security concern not due to any aggressive tendencies, none have been documented, but due to their capacity to influence human consciousness in ways we do not fully understand. Further research is suspended indefinitely. All facilities are to be decommissioned. All personnel are to be debriefed and monitored. They knew. For over 50 years, the government has known these creatures exist, known they're intelligent, known they possess abilities that border on the supernatural, and they've hidden it, buried it, silenced anyone who got too close to the truth. But why? The answer came in Dr. Yazzi's handwritten notes, appended to the end of the folder. They're not animals. They're not undiscovered primates. They're what we might have become if we had made different choices a million years ago. They chose connection over conquest, harmony over dominance. They developed their minds instead of their tools, and they paid the price, pushed to the margins, forced into hiding, watching as their cousins inherited the earth. But they never stopped watching, never stopped hoping. And sometimes, when they encounter a human who carries a spark of what they are, someone whose consciousness resonates at the right frequency, they reach out. The disappeared aren't victims, they're converts. They've crossed over into a way of being that we've forgotten how to access, a way of living in the world that doesn't require possession or destruction. I don't know if they can be brought back. I don't know if they would want to be. But I believe they're still out there, somewhere in those spaces between the trees, living lives we can barely imagine. December 21st, 3 days until Christmas Eve. I'm in Missoula now, checking equipment, studying maps, trying to prepare for something I can't prepare for. I keep looking at the drawing Marcus included with his letter. The triangle with the circle inside, the 3 dots around the perimeter. At first I thought it was abstract, a symbol with meaning known only to him, but last night I overlaid it on a topographical map of the Bitterroot Wilderness. It matched. The triangle corresponds to 3 peaks that form a natural amphitheater at the head of a remote valley. The circle marks a small lake at the valley's center, frozen solid this time of year. The 3 dots align with distinctive rock formations visible on satellite imagery. I know where Marcus wants me to go, and I know what's waiting for me there. December 23rd. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. I've driven as far as the roads allow. Tomorrow morning, I'll hike the final 12 miles to the location Marcus marked. If the weather holds, I should reach the valley by late afternoon. I've written letters to my mother, my ex-wife, my few remaining friends. I've left instructions for what to do if I don't return. I've made peace with the possibility that I'm walking into my own disappearance, but I've also made peace with something else. If Marcus found something in those mountains, something that offered him a different way of being, maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe it's a gift. Maybe he's been living these past 11 years in a state of connection and wonder that I can barely imagine. And maybe, just maybe, he wants to share it. December 24th, Christmas Eve, 4:47 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I'm writing this by flashlight in the back of my truck, waiting for dawn. In a few hours, I'll begin the hike that will either reunite me with my brother or end my life as I know it. Either way, I won't be the same person who started this journey 11 years ago. Marcus called me once, terrified and amazed, trying to describe something beyond description. I dismissed him, told him to get some sleep, and he walked into the forest and never came back. I won't make the same mistake twice. Whatever I find in that valley, whatever ancient intelligence has been watching from the shadows since before humanity learned to make fire, I'll meet it with an open heart. I'll listen. I'll try to understand. And if Marcus is there, if he's been waiting all these years for someone who loved him enough to follow, I'll tell him what I should have said 11 years ago. I believe you. I'm here. I'm not afraid. December 24th, 11:23 p.m. I found them. The valley was exactly where Marcus's map indicated. I reached it as the sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. The frozen lake gleamed like a mirror at the center of the amphitheater, surrounded by ancient pines. I stood at the edge of the tree line, waiting, watching, remembering what Marcus had told me about patience and trust. They came at twilight. I saw him first, a figure emerging from the trees on the far side of the valley, too tall, too broad, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. But beside him, keeping pace, was another figure, smaller, human-shaped. Marcus, he looked different. His hair had grown long and wild, his beard reached his chest, he was dressed in furs and hides, his feet wrapped in something that looked handmade. But his face was the same, older, weathered, but unmistakably my brother. He crossed the frozen lake toward me, alone. The creature waited at the tree line, watching. When Marcus reached me, he didn't speak. He just stood there, looking at me with eyes that held 11 years of experiences I couldn't begin to understand. Then he smiled. "You came," he said. His voice was rusty, unused. "I wasn't sure you would. I got your letter." It took me a long time to remember how to write. Things work differently here. Language, words. They're not as important as what's underneath them. "What happened to you, Marcus? Where have you been?" He looked back at the creature waiting at the edge of the forest. With them. Learning. Becoming. Becoming what? Something more. Something I always was but didn't know. He turned back to me, and I saw tears freezing on his cheeks. "I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I couldn't explain. But what they offered, Danny, I couldn't refuse. It was like coming home to a place I'd never been. Can you come back?" He was quiet for a long moment, Behind him, the creature made a soft sound, low, resonant, almost like singing. "That's not why I asked you here. I didn't bring you to take me home. I brought you to show you, to offer you what they offered me." "What are you saying?" "They've been watching you, Danny, ever since you started searching. They know your heart. They know your loneliness, your hunger for something more than the life you've been living." He reached out and gripped my shoulder. His hand was warm, impossibly warm for the freezing night. "They want you to know you have a choice. You can walk away right now, go back to your life, and never speak of this. Or you can stay, learn what I've learned, become what I've become." The creature at the tree line made another sound. This time, I understood it. Not the words. There were no words, but the meaning underneath. The emotion. The invitation. It was welcoming me. I looked at my brother, at the peace in his eyes, at the 11 years of separation that had somehow led to this moment, two brothers standing on frozen water under winter stars with something ancient and impossible waiting in the shadows. "What does it feel like?" I whispered. "Their world?" Marcus smiled again. "Like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having. Like remembering a song you heard before you were born. Like..." He struggled for words that no longer came easily. "Like being part of everything. The trees, the snow, the mountain itself. All of it connected. All of it alive. All of it aware." "And the loneliness? Mom spent years wondering what happened to you. I spent years searching." Pain flickered across his face. "I know, and I'm sorry. But some doors only open once. Some chances don't come again. When they reached out to me, I had to choose. Human time or forest time, the world I knew or the world that was waiting. Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." I don't know how long I stood there, feeling the weight of the choice before me. The creature waited with infinite patience. Marcus watched with hope and understanding. Finally, I spoke. "I can't. Not yet. Mom is still alive. There are things I need to finish. People who would be destroyed by another disappearance." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand." But I hesitated. "Will you still be here? If I finish what I need to finish? If I come back?" The creature made a sound. Affirmation, promise, patience beyond human comprehension. "We'll be here," Marcus said. "They live in a different kind of time. A year, a decade. It's nothing to them. When you're ready, come back to this valley. They'll know." He embraced me then. My brother, who I thought I'd lost forever, held me under the Christmas stars while snow began to fall around us. "Tell Mom I love her," he whispered. "Tell her I'm not lost. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "She won't believe me." "She will. Deep down, she's always known there was something different about me, something that was never quite satisfied with the world as it was." He stepped back, and I saw that the creature had come closer. It stood 20 feet away now, easily 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that seemed to absorb the starlight. Its face was exactly as Marcus had described, almost human, too human, like something that remembered what it was to be one of us. It looked at me, and I felt something brush against my mind. Not words, not thoughts, just recognition, acknowledgement, a promise kept open. Then it turned and walked back toward the forest. Marcus followed. At the tree line, he paused and looked back one last time. "Merry Christmas, Danny." "Merry Christmas, Marcus." And then they were gone. I'm writing this on the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, 2024. I hiked back through the night, unable to sleep, my mind full of everything I'd witnessed. In a few hours, I'll drive to Missoula and call my mother. I'll tell her something that will sound impossible, but I'll tell her with enough conviction that she'll know somehow that it's true. Her son is alive. He's found something beyond our understanding, and he's at peace. I don't know when I'll go back to that valley. It might be years, it might be decades, but I know now that the door remains open, that somewhere in the deep wilderness, something ancient is waiting. And when I'm ready, when I've lived the life I still need to live, I can walk through. The world will never know the full truth about what hides in those mountains. The government will continue its cover-up. Scientists will continue to mock. And the creatures will continue to watch from the shadows, patient as stones, waiting for the rare human who can hear their call. But I know, I've seen, and I'll never be the same. This is the story of what happened to Ranger Marcus Webb, told by the only person on Earth who knows the truth. This is the story of how I found my brother on Christmas Eve, and this is my promise that someday, when the time is right, I'll find him again.